Hey guys, it's Lainey, what's up? And today I'm doing the what I read for April. For the month of April, my reading was good. However, I did not read as much as I usually do. I read a total of 3 books and 1 ebook, so a total of 4 books altogether. However, I was just kind of in a weird reading mood the entire month. I couldn't really stick with anything, so I have a lot of unfinished books right now that I'm still currently trying to wrap up. Let's get on to the books that I read in April. The Winter's Kiss by Marie Rutowski. I read this book of 5. It completely was like the perfect wrap up to a trilogy I've ever read. I loved it. I was like really emotional while reading it too. I was like consistently tearing up and crying through chapters like 6 through 13. Like it was nonstop tears. This is probably the saddest book, with the exception of Forbidden, that I've ever read. Marie Rutowski has an incredible gift of writing, and I love her writing style and the way she builds scenes and tension. My favorite part about her writing is actually the back and forth between perspectives. She does it flawlessly. Like the transitions are just like perfect, like actually perfect. The next book that I read was Walk the Edge by Katie McGarry. I know, you're probably surprised that I'm holding up a YA contemporary romance, but this is the second book in her Thunder Road series. This was the first book, Nowhere But Here. I actually got this book at BEA last year, but this series has to do with a motorcycle club, but it's also set in like a YA, so it's kind of like Sons of Anarchy, minus the cursing, mostly, minus the illegal activity, minus Jax Teller, but it's such a good substitute, in my opinion. I feel like most Katie McGarry books, correct me if I'm wrong, they're usually companion series. So this is a companion series. This couple is still in this book, kind of, but it's focused on entirely on a different couple. I rated this book a 4 out of 5. Like, I really enjoy them. Are they perfect? I mean, no, and there were some things that did bother me in this book. However, overall, I really enjoy myself while I'm reading these books. The next book I read was a buddy read with Riley and Kenya, and that was Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. I've always been interested in this book because there's so many people that talk about it and so many people that love it. So I wanted to kind of see what the hype was about, so I decided to read it with my friends. And we finished it literally in 24 hours. Less than 24 hours. It's a very short book. The first book's very short. And when you're reading on Kindle, which was what I was doing, you know, you read it really quickly. I rated this book a 2. And I feel like my Goodreads review, which I'll link down below, really encompasses what I really felt about the book. It wasn't exactly the rape or the torture or the abuse that these slaves were experiencing that bothered me. I think it's okay for those things to be put in books. I don't think you should restrict any type of thing in a book. However, what I really didn't like about this book was the ship of the series between Laurent and Damon. I found the relationship, which isn't a lot in the first book, but since I've heard so much about this series, I know that it develops into a relationship, and that's what bothers me. I couldn't get past that while I was reading the first book. The relationship between the two characters, I mean, Laurent is a straight up abuser. He abuses Damon. He set him up to be raped. He is extremely racist towards Damon, which I think a lot of people forget about in fantasy-like settings. There's racism in this book as well, but I don't ever see people talk about racism in fantasy, it feels like. But I feel like if this book had so many different things going for it, if it was between a woman and a male, this book would be in an uproar. I feel like people would not agree with anything that's going on, because if he's abusing a woman, then it's something to talk about. But if it's a male abusing a male, it's okay. I don't think that's right, and that's totally backwards. To step off my soapbox, I will say that the book was extremely readable. I mean, I read it in 24 hours. I will say that the author has a way of making you want to keep reading, and I think that's something very special to have as a writer, to want your reader to keep reading to see what happens, whether it's good or bad. I did like that aspect of it. I didn't like the relationship between the two guys at all. It was totally toxic and unhealthy, and I cannot see them being together in future books. I didn't think there was a plot, and I felt like the world building was extremely lacking. I did start the second book, but it's expensive on Amazon, and I had to return the book 7 days later, so I was like about 20% into it before I stopped reading it. I will say that I did like how the second book seemed to be following a plot line, so I'll give it that. And the last book I read for the month of April was a reread, and that was The Seeds of Iniquity by J.A. Rimurski. This is the fourth book of the In the Company of Killers series. I've been rereading this series all year and really enjoying the reread. It's just as good as when I read it for the first time at the end of last year over the summer and into September. I rated this book a 5. I felt like this book was really the jumping off point for the series, even though I love each and every one of the ones that came before. But I really did love this one because, one, it introduced me to my favorite female character, I think, of all time. Like, I love Nora so much. She's awesome, and I cannot wait to see her more in the next books that haven't been released yet. So those were all the books I read in the month of April. I think my favorite book I read this month was obviously The Winter's Kiss, and the least favorite book I read this month was Captive Prince. So tell me what you guys read in the month of April. I would love to know, and I hope you guys all have a really great day, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!